How's it going, everybody? Today we're going to be going over how to use Lightroom to go from this photo to this photo in about 11 minutes. Let's get to it. Alright, to start here, I've got my photo up, and as you can see at the top here, I shot at ISO 100, 32mm, f16 with a shutter speed of 1 second to get that kind of creamy water look. So just starting right off, to begin, I usually start with the highlights, and if you can see here in the rapids and a little bit in the sky, it's close to being blown out, so I'm going to bring the highlights down. If you watch those areas, you can see the detail come back considerably. So I'm going to bring them all the way down to -100. The shadows, I'm going to bring those up quite a bit, almost to 100, and that's because I'm going to bring the blacks down considerably. So I'll bring them down to about -64. And then for whites, if you hold down the Alt key on your keyboard and click white, it'll go black, and when you scroll this around, whatever turns white on the screen is completely blown out white, where all the information is lost. So I like to bring it to the point where that is just before it turns white, but I'm not losing anything, and leave it there. Clarity, in this case, I'm probably going to bring up. Sometimes you can go into the negative clarity and you can get a good look. I think on this one I am going to bring it up probably, I don't know, maybe 7 or so. No reason for dehaze on this one. And then vibrance, I'm going to bring up a little bit as well, probably +10. And so that's with the basic corrections, and here's a before and after already. So there's before, after, and it's already starting to look better with more contrast and starting to look how we're wanting it. So moving on down, I like to play with the tone curves. I have it on RGB, and I'm going to add just a little bit of an S curve to this, just to get a little bit more pop. And I will take this very bottom node and bring it up, and you can see what happens over here in the dark areas when I do this. It kind of crushes the blacks a little bit and brings them up. If you were to go extreme with it, you can see what happens there. And that can become, you can use that to get some artistic touches. I'm going to bring it up a little bit though, but not too much. And that should be good right there. In the HSL color tab, a lot of time I deal with the saturation. If you want to go different ways, you can bring the contrast down with a lot of things and bring up on others. You can also double click on the saturation to reset everything. I think in the hue, I'm going to try and get these, it looks like a little bit of yellow tones, and I'm going to try and get these more on the green than yellow side. So on the green hue, I'm going to bring that up just a little bit. So I'm using a Sony camera, and it seems to give a little bit more yellow tone than it actually was in real life. So I'm going to kick it up there. Split toning is a very powerful tool, especially for sunsets and things like that. The first box here, the highlights, you can see just affects the highlights of the photo. So one thing I like to do is just kind of go through and see what colors work. I think a lot of times the orangish colors like to work well with the highlights, and then I will complement that with a bluer tone in the shadows. And think about right there, and you can see upward is a higher saturation of color. The further down you go, less saturation. I'm going to go pretty low with it right there. So just for the split toning, you can see the difference it made. Not a drastic difference, but it does kind of get rid of some of the oranges and bring it more of a cool tone, which is what I'm wanting in this photo. Moving down to the sharpening, I do like to go quite a bit up with the sharpening. I might go into the 80s or 90s. And then masking is another one where if you hit the Alt key and click, they bring it up. Whatever's white is going to have the sharpening applied to it. Whatever is black is not. So I don't want it really applied to the water. I'm just going to try and get it to some of the key points here. Probably right there or so will be good. So it's going to apply sharpening here and then some of the foliage. Noise reduction is going to be pointless in this one. I shot at ISO 100 and it's quite clean. So I always apply color noise reduction because it doesn't really negatively affect the photo in any way, but it can definitely help with reducing color noise. Lens correction, I'm going to apply, remove chromatic aberration, and enable profile correction to take the warp out of the photo that was applied or a result of your lens. In this case, I was using a Canon lens on my Sony a7 III, so I'm going to click Canon, and then you can see it brings up my model there. I was using a 16-35 f2.8, and that should be good at that point. So I'm going to close that up. Effects, I'm going to add some vignette, and add quite a bit actually. So I'm going to bring it down pretty dark. I'm going to bring the midpoint in quite a bit, and it's looking really dark, but I'm going to do a lot of dodge and burning to make up for it. So, and then feather it out like about there. So that is pretty much it with the pre-processing, and now we're going to move to local adjustments. And I'm going to use the Radial Filter here, and I'm going to do some dodge and burning. On this one, let's see where I'd like to start around 30, about 0.3, and I'm going to see, I want to go pretty heavy on the dodge and burn on this one, so I don't think 0.3 is going to quite work in this one. Or maybe I'll go to 0.6. I know it's kind of extreme, but see how it looks. So you can right click and duplicate and move around, or you can, oops, go back to 0.3. You can just draw them on in other places. So I'm going to go to the highlight areas, kind of brighter spots here, along there, and just reinforce the brightness of those and make them pop to add more drama to the photo. And just go around this part. You can spend a lot of time dodge and burning. I don't know really a mechanical method to it. It's just kind of having an eye and looking for the high spots or bright spots and accenting those and kind of bringing them out extra. This over here, I'm probably going to add quite a bit more exposure or increase the exposure quite a bit. And maybe even about like that. So I'm going to do some rock. This rock I'm going to bring out quite a bit because this is the focal point of the photo. This side's particularly dark and I didn't want it like that, so I'm going to bring that back up. So we have quite a bit of room to bring back up the shadows in this. For one, I shot it at a native ISO and I've got 15 stops of dynamic range on this camera. But two is it wasn't really that dark to begin with. We became dark with it when we brought down the blacks considerably. So just gonna brighten the whole rock up to start with. And if you hold down the space bar and then click, you can zoom in while you're still in the tool, or you can also drag doing that. I'm gonna do a little bit of local dodge and burning on these high spots here as well, just to kind of make up a little bit more drama on the rock. Same with these rocks. If I can get in here, you can see it blurry. So for one, I had a long shutter speed, and two is the depth of field wasn't that large. Even at f16, I was pretty close to that rock and I was focused on it. So that guy, I'm going to bring this rock up here quite a bit as well. About like so. And this one, perhaps. Bring that up quite a bit. And then maybe add a little bit of highlighting to these water spots here that are whiter. Another thing we can do here, if we don't want to go just radial filter with it, is we can brush increase exposure on some of this stuff to follow along certain paths. So that's looking pretty good. I think I'm going to click new and bring it down now, maybe to negative 0.26. I'm just going to stick with a brush at this point and brush on some decreased exposure, if that's a way of saying it. and just to give a little bit more drama and contrast to the photo and add more interest to it. And I think I'm going to bring it down a little bit more, perhaps. And some there. Just kind of picking the dark spots and making them a little bit darker. And yeah. All right, I think that looks good. So I'm going to click done. And I believe that is what I am looking for. Oh, we got a sensor spot here. I'll take that out. So at this point, I would just go through and look for some sensor spots and everything, and clean those up if there are any, and call it good. So if you like this video, be sure to subscribe. I think I'm going to start doing some more tutorial videos like this for Lightroom. And make sure to hit that like button, and we'll see you on the next one.